Welcome to MEDA 5720, Organization of Information, or what is commonly known as cataloging. In this presentation, you're going to see a broad overview of the topics that we're going to cover this semester. Hopefully this will give you a frame of reference for the topics we'll cover. First of all, I want to say you're a lucky dog. For many years, librarians had to actually type information by hand. We're so lucky in this day and age that we don't have to do that. We have library automation systems that will help us with our cataloging. This is an example of a catalog card. Can you imagine typing this card by hand? One challenge was the precision with which the cards were typed. For example, the title began so many spaces over, the author had to begin so many spaces over, so forth and so on. So when a librarian typed one of these cards, he or she not only typed one, but there was a shelf list card, a title card, author cards, and maybe even several subject cards. This is a book called All About Lovebirds, as you can probably ascertain from the catalog card. This is what your patrons might see when they looked in a card catalog for this book, All About Lovebirds. Do you remember this contraption? Does anybody not remember this contraption? Have you ever seen one? Before the days of automation, this is how we would access a book or some other item in our library. We would go to this, which is a card catalog, and thumb through the cards, which are arranged alphabetically. We would then write down the call number of the book we would want, and then we would go find it on the shelves. Nowadays, we don't have to do that. We go to a computer station to access that same book, find that same call number, and go find the book. This is a screenshot of the Destiny software library automation system by Follett. Patrons can search by keyword, title, author, subject, and even more. It's really nice to have this type of automation system, but how do you get all this information in there? This is an example of what your student might see if he or she looked up the book Hunters of the Dusk by Darren Shan. Doesn't it look good? You can see the title, where it's published, the edition. It looks good. This is also an example of Iron Hand by Charlie Fletcher. This is what your student might see if he or she looked up this book. Our class is going to address this question. How did all this data about books and materials get into the computer, and how is it accessed consistently? Nowadays, what we do is when we order our records, our books, our videos, they come to us online or on a CD. And all we have to do is stick that in our computer and ta-da! It's uploaded. So at this point you may be asking yourself, well, if that's so easy, why do I have to take this class? There are several reasons why you might want to catalog a book by hand. You might want to enter information directly from a book or an item. Let's say you may have materials that are donated by a parent. A child may donate some materials to you. You may earn some books or things from a scholastic book fair, or you may have other odd materials for which you just don't have a record. You may have kits or games, Monopoly, Scrabble game, some kind of kit, something like that. However, the most important reason that you should take this class is, as a school library media professional, you need to know the fundamentals and backgrounds of cataloging when you actually sit down to catalog a book. We're going to start with MARC. That's going to be our first major topic. MARC is an acronym for Machine Readable Cataloging. And basically it's just a digital code for describing books, DVDs, maps, kits, any other item in our records for our computer system. The Library of Congress is the entity which facilitates computerized cataloging. This is an example of a MARC record. As you can see, the numbers on the left-hand column, you see these numbers are called tags. The middle column, those are called indicators. The small case letters here on the right are called subfields. The information in each area is called field information. As you look at this MARC record, you can even recognize items. Can you pick out the title? If you picked out the title Kira Kira here in the 245 tag, you're absolutely correct. That's our title for this item. And we'll be dealing with MARC records and learning how to enter information into MARC records and make it where our students can find it. This is another example of a MARC record. Can you pick out the title on this item? If you said planning for automation, how to do it manual for librarians, you are absolutely correct. And MARC is one of the major topics that we'll be discussing in this class. Another major topic is called AACR2. MARC tells us how to does not tell us rather how to describe the materials. It's more or less a standard for coding. We have a rule book that tells us how to describe the materials, and that is called the Anglo-American Cataloging Rules, or AACR2. It tells us how to describe materials. It provides guidelines for the description of all types of cataloging situations. Here we see the concise AACR2, which might tell us how to catalog an example of a book by Mark Twain. Let's say you have an item that has an author with a pen name or pseudonym. Do we use Samuel Clemens or do we use Mark Twain? We look to the AACR2 to provide answers for us in these types of situations. Another situation that you might have a situation that you might want to look in the AACR2 would be where you would have different versions of the same work. For example, the Bible is a book that has many versions, and we might look to AACR2 to help us. You might have a patron that wants to access the King James Version of the Holy Bible. You might have a children's version. But we need to make all of these items consistent where a person can find them anywhere. AACR2 rules provide for the headings of access points, and they give us consistent rules so that we can find a book, whether we're in Johnson City, or if we're in Alaska, or if we're in England, by author, title, series, or any other added entries. AACR2 gives us descriptions, but it does not tell us about the subjects of our books. AACR2 does not tell us how to use controlled vocabularies for subject heading terminology. We have other sources for that, and we have two sources for subject headings. Now, what do I mean by a subject heading? A subject heading might be dogs fiction or folk tales from the United States. It's simply what your item is about and how your patron will access that item. The first major subject heading source that we're going to use is Sears' list of subject headings, and this is the one with which we'll be most concerned. Sears subject headings are used widely in small public school libraries, especially for children and youth. It's the one that we're going to use. There's another subject headings list, and it's the Library of Congress, and it's used quite extensively, but not as much in school libraries, and so we're not going to focus on it quite as extensively. In this class, we're also going to look at two classification systems. The major topic that we'll cover is the Dewey Decimal System, but let's look at what a classification system is. What do I mean by that? By a classification system, if you go to a library and you look at the spine label of a book, you're going to find numbers that will be the classification system. It basically tells us the address of the book and how we can find it and how the materials are grouped together on the shelves. We're going to be looking primarily at the Dewey Decimal System in this class because it's used mostly by school libraries. Dewey is grouped into 10 main categories to organize nonfiction materials, and we'll learn those categories and how to assign those numbers to a particular book or video in your library. The Library of Congress is also a classification system that is used, but it's used primarily by academic libraries and not by school libraries very much at all, so we're not going to look at that quite as extensively. In this class, hopefully, you're going to look at MARC records. We're going to learn how to organize those and put those in the computer. We're going to look at AACR2 descriptions. We're going to look at subject headings and classification systems. Hopefully, this has given you an introductory background on the organization of library media. So, with these topics in your mind, let's move on, and our first assignment in Module 1